So I said I had a couple more videos to do, but it turns out I have about 3 or 4 more videos to do. So, you know, I did the Venus and Gemini video yesterday, but I realized I had more to say about Venus and Gemini. So please take a look at my video from yesterday, and I'm going to put a link to that at the end of this one, and this one as well, because they concern the same theme. Yesterday, we talked about the fact that Venus in Gemini is going to go retrograde from the middle of May to the end of June. And we talked about the fact that at that time, the idea of financial and relationship evaluation, which makes sense in the context of everything that is going on right now, would be a theme. With Venus retrograde, we're always concerned with Venus retrograde, we are typically always concerned with the fact that our financial belts often are tightened for us. And so we are forced to look at what we value, where it is that our money is going, and the idea that, you know, the question of whether what we own owns us or whether we own it, and use our resources and what it is that we own and possess to further our aims or goals, or have they started to hold us back, and therefore do they need to be pruned? Hence the title of yesterday's video, Pruning. I'm not going to go into the correlation between the coronavirus timeline and the pruning exercise that was there in yesterday's video. It's there in abundance, and I'm not going to talk about it in this video. This video, there were a couple more points about Venus and Gemini that I wanted to mention. Venus is fundamentally a planet of natural abundance and natural flow. She's not the planet of, as much as it's projected onto her, she's not the planet of supply and demand and capitalism. It's a different kind of abundance. It's the fact that fruit grows in trees, and Venus is in Taurus right now, so the Venus in Taurus video I did, greening, one of the byproducts of the lockdowns and the quarantines, as I mentioned yesterday, is this uncanny feeling that even with this brief a lockdown, the planet is trying to somehow nurture itself and correct itself and restore itself, whether it is turtles laying eggs during the daytime on coastal parts of India, or whether it is the ozone layer healing itself. I don't know how much of all this we can really believe, but I'd like to believe that this is the case, or whether it's the fact that wildlife is coming into the cities, or, you know, whatever it is, that kind of natural abundance that is prevalent all around us. Venus is typically a passive planet and encourages things happening by themselves through natural intelligence and wisdom, as opposed to mercurial, our mind trying to figure things out and create things and trying to combat nature and work with nature and fight with nature and all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to Venus being in Gemini, this kind of relaxed passive planet being in really a very active and practical and socially attuned sign, as I said, it's not a question of Venus being fallen or in detriment. It may not be the most comfortable of placements. However, there's one aspect of Venus in Gemini that is worth mentioning, and that again builds on yesterday's video. Some aspect of conversations and thoughts and processing of financial and relationship issues may take on a social nature. People may end up... Gemini is the sign of conversations and communication, writing, teaching, speaking, using words and language, listening, being plugged in, fitting in. Siblings, cars, vehicles, commuting. So the Venus retrograde period and Venus in Gemini, some of you watch cars, vehicles breaking down, new ones needing to be brought into, you know, reevaluating vehicles and commuting. Reevaluating commuting in the current day and age with the lockdowns. Siblings, relatives, commuting, fitting in, communicating, skill acquisition, teaching, writing, all that, you know, social media, technology. When Venus is... We're going from a time period with Venus in Taurus where Venus is much more solitary and much greener, much more abundant, much more isolated, to a time when Venus, and therefore our relationships and financials, are going to become a lot more social. And in the time of this kind of lockdown, it wouldn't be surprising if the social nature is much more technical. This is all fitting into the Venus and Gemini emails, reaching out over Facebook, Zooms, even more of that, you know, between now and August, with this reevaluation between the middle of May and the end of June. But also, as we go into this reevaluation phase of our financials and our relationships from the middle of May to the end of June, some aspect of the reaching out and the way that solutions are found may also have a social and a communicative nature. People coming together to lobby for things, to plead for things, to ask for things, to demand things, to social movements, a way for people to reach out to each other through remote and technical means, to canvas and to adjust to financial realities and reevaluations could be a theme. In addition, people offering discounts, finding interesting ways and being in touch with others to figure out how it is that they can manage their own abundance or offer their services or work with each other. Classes going online even more, you know. A lot of this has a Venus and Gemini kind of feeling to it. And when Venus is about 5 degrees away from Gemini, as it's been over the past week and a half, some of that kind of starts to build anyway. So while yesterday established the meaning and the purpose of the Venus retrograde, I really wanted to alert you to the idea that financial decision-making, financial adjusting, and relationship decision-making and relationship adjusting, and things like luxuries and abundance, and who has what, and how do we share, and where is our information coming from, and what's going on, and what is on the news, and all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, things related to Venus, our sense of abundance and whether we feel scarce or abundant, will take on a much more connected and social quality. People may communicate with each other with regard to, and I mean in a local way. I mean in a local neighborhood way. Gemini is the sign of neighbors and neighborhoods. Your well, the well you live in, the people and the communities you interact with every day on a day-to-day basis. Your barista, your coffee shop, wherever you get your tea, your grocery store, the colleagues you work with, where you go to work, where you commute, where you take your kids. What is your day-to-day routine? All of that is very Geminian. It is Gemini. And so as a result of that, financial and relationship decision-making and abundance and support and scarcity and communicating, this is what is going on in my grocery store, this is what is going on here, this is what is going on there, is this a problem? Does someone need something? Do I have something that you can use? Do you have something? But even from a commercial perspective, as I said, reaching out to each other electronically, through computer means, messages, finding different ways of transmitting information, finding different ways of, and ingenious ways of talking about your services, to some extent advertising or marketing, or, you know, it's more local than big or broadcasting. The other thing about Gemini is that Gemini is not a sign that is associated or interested in spirituality or philosophy or big picture stuff or being out of your, it is an extraordinarily present political sign. Where am I? Who am I around? How are things going? Who has the power? Who has influence? How can I get something done? And so Venus, when the planet of relationships and money and creativity and the arts and all these Venusian things comes into Gemini, she can't help but be affected by this. Venus in Taurus, which she is till April the 3rd, sits back and rules over Taurus. Now in Gemini, she's ruled by Mercury. This brings me to the other thing I wanted to discuss here, which is when Venus goes retrograde from the middle of May to the end of June is when the sign of Gemini sees other typical yearly transits. Mercury comes into Gemini 2 days before Venus goes retrograde. So the idea of this video really builds upon yesterday's video. So I will place a link to this once I'm done processing it. So the idea of Venus retrograde is really supported because the planet governing Venus in retrograde, Mercury, becomes really strong 2 days before Venus goes retrograde in Gemini, the sign that Mercury rules. And this idea of pruning and reevaluating and taking stock of things and understanding where we are at financially on a personal and a social and a national level, and what is the impact of the lockdown or the shutdown, dealing with the realities that maybe for some of us April and the beginning part of May still feel abundant, but then the middle of May and June may not feel quite so. But what do I have? What financial decision making do I need to do in order to support where it is that I want to go? You know, the process is starting now, but as I said, that's when some of the adjusting could really hit home. But we will have Mercury support, so the planet of communication and thinking. And then the Sun moves into Gemini on May the 20th, a week after Venus goes retrograde, and you have a new moon a couple of days after the Sun moves into Gemini. So the Venus retrograde period, while typically it's a transit that is disliked because the flow of abundance is stopped, the tap is shut, so that we are forced to deal with the finite nature of what it is that we have, as opposed to the feeling that what we have is part of an infinite flow, which it is more often than not, and for much of the year, or much better part of 2 years, except when Venus goes retrograde and says, all right, it's time to prune. We've become a little too used to the fact that the water's flowing and the cups are flowing and the fruit is on the trees and the vegetables. You know, where are we at right now? And as we discussed, right now we're not seeing the impact of only having essential functions open on our supply chain middle of May to end of June. I'll leave what I said about that in my video from yesterday. So know and understand that some of the solutions and some of the way we're going to reach out are going to become more social in terms of the way we reach out to each other for support socially, relationships, and financially. And technology is going to play a role in that. It's playing out. I mean, I'm saying it, and it's really so obvious that the transit is here. And then the other part of it is the fact that the Venus retrograde period is really very highlighted and quite powerful with the fact that Mercury and the Sun are both going to be in Gemini during the time that Venus is retrograde. So this period of reevaluation and trying to figure out what you value and where it is that you're going and what owns you and what you own and what needs to be pruned is not only going to be aided by our mental and thinking and communication processes, but it's also going to be spotlit, and you're going to have the power of a new moon and a lunar cycle during that time. Okay, as I've mentioned, April is a time of forward movement. I've defined forward movement in yesterday's video. You can take a look at it even if you feel like you're not doing forward movement right now. Know and understand that as I stand here right now, it's a beautiful day in Los Angeles, I can see the quarter moon in the sky, and the pace is only going to increase. And you may laugh at me and say, it's lockdown, what do you mean the pace is going to increase? Just watch over the next week. You will have more to do, more to take on, more ideas, more thoughts, more needs to be done. It doesn't have to be work, but it will be work, chores. The pace is going to increase. You're going to have more to do than you can handle as the week progresses. And that's just where we are. I'm kind of sneaking in a little bit, people who watch my channel, a little bit of compass work in this transit video, just because I don't want to do another video where all I'm saying is, oh, the full moon is a week away and we're going to have more to do. And yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to highlight and say about the Venus in Gemini transit for now. April, a month of forward movement, and beginning of May. Middle of May to the end of June, reevaluation, and then some part of June and the middle of July, Mercury going retrograde in Cancer. So taking mental stock and investigating where we're at with everything that has been going on before we start to move ahead again in August. Also, June and July eclipses, a reminder, pay attention to eclipsy things and signs of what needs to be released this week and next week, the week before April 4th and the week after. The video I did 2 or 3 days ago will talk to that. So I've been doing daily videos now for the past 2 or 3 days, so all you need to do to find out more about the stuff I'm talking about, the eclipse, it's the day before yesterday. It's the video I did before the Venus and Gemini video, so take a look at that if this concept is new to you. That's it. I'm going to leave it here. Standard stuff. If you like this video, found it useful, please feel free to share it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, or click the bell icon next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I do a video if you like it, or comment on the video. It boosts circulation. And my contact information is in the description area, so if you would like to inquire about rates for readings or want me to make an easy to read version of your chart, that'll tell you which sign is in which house and what the houses stand for, feel free to send me an email. You'll need to know your birth time for that, and I'll let you know what the rate is, and you can decide whether you want to avail of that service or not. I'll leave it for now. Back in touch tomorrow. Thanks.